Hi, everyone. I'm Barry Friedland. I'm with Jacob Kravitz of Don't Shop on Tuesday, having another important, exciting, and fun chat. Today, we're with Diana Emerson, and she is Executive Director of Waverly Main Street. And Waverly is a really vibrant and interesting and diverse neighborhood in Baltimore City. And I know that a lot of you live throughout the country and abroad. So she's going to tell us about this wonderful place, what they're doing, and some of the obstacles and challenges that they're facing. So, Diana, thank you for coming to chat with us.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So, starting out, can you tell us about your organization and tell us about this neighborhood and why people need to get in the plane and come here and visit?
Yeah, of course. Waverly Main Street is one of 9 of Baltimore City's Main Street. So we are a part of the National Main Street program. So depending on where you live, hopefully there is a local Main Street. And the focus is to support small businesses. So we're talking about your mom and pops, we're talking about startups, we're talking about entrepreneurs that have a dream, that have an idea. Hopefully, that is really what your Main Street is comprised of. So we are also in a historic area. So we were adjacent to the home of the original Camden Yards which would have been Memorial Stadium in Maryland, where the Orioles played. And then before that, we actually had Oriole Park, which is also in our original footprint. So we work with kind of maintaining the historical structure of the neighborhood and the composition of the neighborhood, where we actually sit between 6 different communities. So our job is really, not just to make these communities happy, but we do that by having a flourishing Main Street because we know smart economic development increases your property value. It makes your neighborhood stronger by being able to have really, really good economic development.
By having a local area, right, it builds a sense of community too, right? By
It
keeping
does.
business and having people actually know the people who they're dealing with and the people, in the area and repeat customers and, really builds and Baltimore, as you know, is like a city of neighborhoods. And so each of them, has these incredible, sort of characters. And so sort of helping that flourish is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I think, for a Main Street, I think sometimes that's that small town feeling that you get just by having a Main Street in your community. These are folks that you get to know. These are folks who become a part of the neighborhood. They become a part of your family. We have businesses. One of our long-standing business, he's been here now 27 years. We just celebrated one of our many bookstores, since we're also home to the Baltimore Book Festival. But we just celebrated one of our bookstores like 30th anniversary. So people put roots here and they become family. They become home.
Just a plug for us. We say 6 days a week, shop locally, go into your neighborhoods and find better, you know, better products, better service, and support your neighbors. And that is literally our mission.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that leads kind of right into dollar stores, right? When we talk about being able to support small businesses. So if we think about the pandemic, small businesses were impacted the most. However, while they were impacted the most, those small businesses were the ones that were out here making sure that people had food on their tables. They were making sure that they
Mhm.
were coming up with creative ways to create hand sanitizer when we didn't have it. They were figuring out creative ways to make face masks. You didn't see your big box chains doing that, even though they have the workforce. You have to ask them,
Mhm.
how did you treat your workforce? Were you supportive of your workforce? When our small businesses, they're truly thinking about not just their communities that they're in, they're thinking about their employees. They're thinking about who is coming to their shops and how it does become one big family. So when I have a business like a dollar store, no matter what chain, none of them think in those terms. They're not thinking about how they are protecting their employees. They're not thinking about the quality of the products that they are putting on their shelves. They're there to make money, and they're going to do that off of you. They're going to do that off of your backs, regardless of quality or support or care. It's about the bottom line and the dollar.
I've seen two different figures online that they're $39,000 stores, and I saw one as high as $45,000 stores throughout, not in Waverly, but throughout the country. And besides the deceptive advertising, the problematic pricing, the inferior products, the very low wages, in addition to that, as you very well pointed out, they are not our neighbors. They are not, and they don't care. And they also, now in Waverly, at least you have, a robust, robust Main Street. But in many areas, it inhibits better services, better merchants coming in. You have a dollar store, and that stops others from coming in.
Yeah, I mean it does a domino effect, right? And I got to testify last month on a dollar store bill that Baltimore City Council is hoping would alleviate some of the issues that communities have with dollar stores. And, one of the things, and at least one of the pushbacks that I've seen from the dollar store corporations is that they feel like we are blocking competition when in reality we're not blocking competition. I expect businesses sometimes to have the same product. That's going to happen whether you're a small business or you're a big box retailer. But what I do care about is that if you're moving into a community, especially a residential community that has mixed use properties, that you understand the dynamics and the relationship of what you are supposed to do in that community. We had a Rite Aid that closed right before the pandemic or kind of in the middle. And when they closed, one of the jobs of a Main Street, when we can, we will work with developers, we'll work with entrepreneurs, we'll work with small businesses to say, hey, I have a vacant spot. How can I help you? How can I help get you here? And, folks here in Baltimore know as soon as I see a business close in another neighborhood, I'm usually the first call that they get because I'm going, hey, where are you going? Do you need a new spot? Here, let me make Waverly your home. How can I do that? So, when we tried to do that, the owner of the property said, you know what? Waverly needs a dollar store. And, we don't get into legal transactions. We typically are not aware of a legal transaction until it happens. So the sale of a building, we may not know until the building has finally sold. So when he approached me to have this conversation, the building had already sold. And we said, great, you're the new owner. You've done amazing projects in other parts of the city. Why do we specifically need a dollar store when we have a small business already, a very popular small business in our footprint that already does dollar-esque products that are better quality, and it's already a small owned, family owned business. So again, why do we need the dollar store? And he said, oh, we'll give you guys fresh fruit. First of all, I don't know anyone who truly wants grocery items from a dollar store. I really don't want my apples and my bananas coming from the dollar store, but maybe that's me. And I questioned him again and said, there's a supermarket less than 5 feet from where you're still going to put this dollar store in. So again, why would I choose you over going to, an actual big box supermarket? And they really don't have answers to those questions. We asked the dollar store, we said, okay, can you do something for us? We see in the Midwest that you actually have these higher quality dollar stores that have higher quality items. They're really geared at your crafters, your folks who were looking at home improvement. We would love that. They said, we don't think we can do that. Why? Do you not think that we don't have a market for that? An area like Waverly that has tons of artists and creatives and makers and crafters, and they didn't have a response. So then my next approach was to ask for a community MOU, and we actually are the holders of quite a few community MOUs with other businesses that come in that
Can you,
could be
oh,
problematic.
can you tell our listeners what that is?
Yeah, it's a memorandum of understanding, and we draft it with kind of specific language that is encouraging them to be a good neighbor. So usually some standard language is, um, if you see something, be active, call the police. If you have interactions in your establishment, you are responsible for that. Don't put that on anyone else. Make sure you're cleaning the front and the sides and the back of your establishment. Make sure you're disposing trash. And I feel like these are really simple things. These are things that you probably already do if you're a good neighbor, if you live near people. So it shouldn't be a hard ask. And the dollar store told me no. They told me they felt like it wasn't legally binding and they didn't have to sign it. And they didn't. And they heard the community outcry that they weren't wanted, as they were building. And I actually worked with our council person um, to slow them down a little bit so that we could really get give communities the opportunity to voice their concerns. And unfortunately, we were unsuccessful. And the dollar store signed on for a 10-year lease. And of course, they came to us, they moved here in 2023 and they are already gone in 2025. So they didn't even last long. So hopefully that means I did my job, because I think, good at applying pressure. And, I wasn't going to let them slide. The area has rules and regulations. And even when I testified, that was a part of my testimony for the bill hearing for Baltimore City Council, is that there are rules, laws, and regulations. And every time, I made a report to any of our city agencies, it's because they were violating those rules and laws and regulations that already exist. So I'm not creating something new to just, make trouble for them. They had a trashy alley. We were constantly after them, weeks, months, and days, because they would put trash out and just leave it, not even in the right place. And I said, time after time, you are showing us how you feel about our community. You don't value our community when, this is an incredibly diverse area. You have students, you have doctors and lawyers, you have nonprofit workers, you have families, you have seniors. You are telling us by your actions how you value our community, which was really zero value. A lot of our businesses had to increase their security measures because typically dollar stores, especially in urban areas and urban communities, theft typically goes up because dollar stores have lax laws on how they handle, and I said laws, but lax rules on how they handle theft. So
Also,
everybody else has to suffer around them.
aren't they also under have less workers or less people there than they need, or
Mhm.
that's necessary? I'm going to let Jacob jump in. I just want to say how stupid were they not to listen to you? I mean, you're coming in basically handing them the recipe for some level of success. I mean, I used to live in Charles Village and then moved to Oakenshaw before I went to another part of the city. And I loved walking up to Greenmount Avenue. It was so vibrant and fresh and not manufactured, not, not this chain and that chain and this chain. It was just so individualized. And but there's so many houses and so many students and so many artists that need, stuff for home repair, that need things for their houses. They just didn't listen to you, who you are boots on the ground 24/7.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other part of my job, is that when the community has a complaint, I take it directly to the business owner. I take it right to the manager to say, hey, how can we resolve this? Let me help you resolve this before this becomes a bigger issue. Because once it's a bigger issue, it's above me. I can't help you at that point, because I'm giving you the opportunity to say, hey, let me be a good neighbor. We're here. We know you don't want us here. We know the community doesn't want us here. How can we be good neighbors? Our area, one of the things that we do, of course, in Baltimore, graffiti is an issue. While I have, I'll say, limited graffiti in Waverly, when we've been successful in finding funds, we immediately hire an artist. We immediately work with them to come up with a mural to make your building look better. And they were in luck. They were already in a building that had a great mural on the side of it. We said, hey, so that means if you get graffiti, let us know. We can, when we do our graffiti blitzes, we actually send out volunteers to help the businesses paint over the graffiti in their exact color. Because one of the things that has happened, and a lot of people don't recognize this, if you live in a residential community and someone does graffiti on your property, you can pick up the phone, you can call your city, and they'll say, great, we'll take care of that for you. There's no expense. If a business calls and reports graffiti, they're issued a fine. So it's very, very different, because then the city says, hey, you have graffiti on your building. You need to make your building look nice. It's a commercial district. You have 30 days to remove this, or the fine is going to continue to go up. We already know, especially after the pandemic, our small businesses are still struggling to recover from the pandemic. So an expense like that, while it may seem small, if you have to do it 4, 5, 6 times, it's going to add up. So that's kind of where we have stepped in. And I created a volunteer program where once a month we have a list of, this business was hit, that business was hit. We know your color. We've already bought it. We're going to paint it for you. They didn't want us to do that. They wanted their graffiti to just kind of live there. And I said, not a problem. I'll just make sure you get fined. Easy. So, and they were fined regularly. Same thing with their trash. They were dumping their trash in the alley, no cleanup, no dumpster, nothing, just dumping trash in an alleyway. And actually, where they were dumping it really wasn't an alleyway. They assumed it was an alleyway, and it was actually a pretty busy street. But that's what happens when you're moving into a neighborhood that you know nothing about. So again, going to the manager, going to the property owner, and I actually had gotten to the point where I was going to their regional area supervisor to kind of say, hey, get one of your chains together. They're dumping their trash. They have graffiti. It looks a mess on the inside. We deserve and demand better. Did they clean up the trash? No. So therefore, they started receiving city fines for dumping, improper disposal of trash and dumping. They're loading trucks. And our street for Waverly, is Greenmount Avenue. That is our main road. That road, depending on where you are on that road, could be a city road, a state road, or a federal road. So we have different
Mm.
rules depending on where you are. So there is no loading at all for any business on our main street. And we also have a fire department. So you can't block the fire department because you want to load your crappy merchandise.
Right.
You know? So we worked actually with our councilwoman and the fire department to put up additional street markings so that it was now going to be very well and widely known, do not park here. And they still were parking there. So they started getting fined and started getting towed. So, you know, that's how we had to really combat it. But each time they were
Mhm.
already telling us, we don't care. We don't care about your rules, your laws, your regulations. We're going to do what we want. And that's that.
Ultimately it was successful in terms of driving them out. And so, you know,
Yeah.
this is a happy story really around how strong communities, right, that
Yeah.
actually, you know, care about, you know, maintaining that cohesion and you know those neighborhood bonds are able to fight back. Um, but unfortunately, that's not, you know, like we were just discussing, you know, there's 40,000 of these. And so what happens in places where they don't have, you know, sort of a main street and a group of people that are ready and willing and sort of focused on actually maintaining that community? What happens when these stores come in?
Yeah, I mean, when these stores come in and there's no one actively applying pressure, you have a couple of things that's going to happen. You're going to have an uptick of theft and petty crime. You're going to have these stores that are not visibly appealing, both interior and exterior. And then what we've kind of seen here in the city, because there's a couple of loopholes in how they've been able to get in, you're going to see they're going to pop up like McDonald's, right? There was a time, and I think this has kind of changed a little bit, but I remember, because I feel like I'm old enough to remember this, when there used to be a McDonald's like every other block. You could go like not even half a mile, it would be a McDonald's, a McDonald's, a McDonald's. That's now how dollar stores are functioning. And it doesn't even matter what chain. They can be multiple chains, and you're literally going to have three or four or five of these dollar stores pop up in less than a 5 mile radius. Why?
Yeah.
Like I mean, and again, I am all for
What is this
competition.
business model? Because it doesn't even seem like they, right, like they're still stuck with that 10-year lease, right? At
Yeah.
least in the case of Waverly. So, you know, I don't even understand how, from a rapacious, I don't care about anything business perspective, how this is even good practice, what you're
Right.
describing.
Like I've never understood just how they function. And when we were looking at this bill actually on a statewide level, which unfortunately I was working with our senator and we couldn't get it passed on a statewide level, just being able to put some laws and restrictions on how many dollar stores you can have within a footprint, which is kind of why it wind up coming to council, because they wanted to say, okay, let's allow the counties and the cities to make that distinction, but there's no rhyme or reason to have that many dollar stores when there's food deserts, there's all of these other needs in a community. How is this meeting that need? And 9 out of 10 times it's not meeting that need. And they're not necessarily doing this um in all neighborhoods. It they definitely target certain areas, but we were working with I believe it was somewhere in the Midwest, and they were successfully able to pass that type of legislation that put more of a boundary restriction. It was hard, and definitely the dollar stores fought back. And, you know, if you're following what's here in Baltimore, they've made numerous comments about
Mm.
how they felt they were treated, specifically here in Waverly, and how, they're highly against this legislation, but we have to figure something out. I mean, no one wants 10 Walmarts right next to each other because at some point, a couple of them are going to fail.
You know,
Totally. And
oh, when we were,
I just wanted to ask, just beforehand, we've been talking a lot about specifically, and you bring this up. What would you consider the difference between like a dollar store and another type of, because like Walmart is its own thing, right? That's a
Yeah.
difference from a dollar store. They have their own set of problems around what they do when they come into communities, but presumably that is a separate, if
Hmm.
related, issue to what. So what typifies dollar stores specifically
It
versus
it's
other types
usually
of?
that $1 to like $2 range. It's typically a very low quality. They typically only carry their brand or knockoff or dupe brands of very similar brands that you probably know for each product. When I was actually researching, I think it was Dollar General or Dollar Tree, I can't remember which one. Um, that's how I found out that they had like different levels of their
Mm.
dollar store. So they had like, your standard dollar store that you see, but then they had a higher quality dollar store. And, again, the language dollar store is very misleading when you walk into a store and everything is really like 350 and up. So the language gets tricky, but they had like this higher level where they sold a higher, and higher is probably stretching a little bit, but just the next level of quality products, that even how the stores were set up looked very, very different in comparison to what they had as your standard, I think what we know as dollar stores. And when I did that research, they typically only put those like in the Midwest. And so then I was challenging them, going, why? Why can't, if you are sending one of your chains here, why can't this be a more interactive conversation where we can kind of tell you, hey, we know what these people buy. We know this community. We've done the market analysis. We know what they're looking for. And they just weren't willing to give us that higher level versus what they think we're probably worth.
when before we started recording, I mentioned that we have allies all over the country and in Canada and Europe, and they might not have a you. There might not be a Diana there, and there might not be this cohesive community. But I feel that you have given them a laundry list of ways to deal with the dollar stores in their area, because except for Alaska and Hawaii, every state has multiple dollar stores, and they're predators. They're,
Yeah.
I used to live in your area, which was lovely, and then I moved to what was once one of the poorest neighborhoods in Baltimore, now is fairly affluent. And a dollar store wouldn't even, we had three grocery stores. I mean, a dollar store would not even think of coming here. And so, it just stuns me. They're not business geniuses. They're continue to have fines when you show them ways to get around it. But I just want to emphasize, because we say this a lot when we talk to someone in Tennessee or Mississippi, that challenges, the challenges echo throughout towns and cities throughout the country. And so don't take this as, wow, I wish I live in Waverly, which would be great. But this is some of the ways that we can develop a thriving, friendly, interactive community.
Yeah. I mean,
Completely. Sorry,
oh
go
no,
ahead.
no, no, no. Go ahead, Jacob.
I was just gonna ask you. You had mentioned before that there are 9 of these main streets throughout Baltimore. So that means that there are 9 sort of nonprofit nonprofit organizations that are sort of around community revitalization for 9 specific sort of areas in the city. How common of this is a practice in throughout, and how it says that Waverly was started in 2000, and so I wonder, um, how common of a practice is this? Where does one get funding, and how can one start to sort of replicate this if they're interested in their own community?
Yeah, that's a
Not just as individuals around the fine, but to sort of systematize it in the way that and formalize it in the way that you have.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. And I've actually been with Waverly since 2000. Not in this role, but I was an original board member way back when. So I remember what that looks like and the growing pains of making this kind of an official organization because we saw that there was a need, right? I think that's always the first piece of that is recognizing there's a need. The need was the businesses wanted cohesion. They all wanted the same thing. They wanted to be a part of a community, which granted, Waverly runs parallel to 6 and a couple offshoots um, communities, but we had to really look at, well, how do we make it its own living, breathing thing? And Waverly, we're actually proud to say we're one of the original Baltimore Main Street. So there's additional Main Streets that have come on along the way. And we just picked up our 9th, I believe last year, the 9th Main Street was added, but it was really understanding the need, having the businesses that were like, hey, we have a great thing happening here, and figuring out how to mesh community with business successfully, because they are truly one and the same thing. Whether the business people live here or not, they're still invested in this community because this is where their business is. This is who they're supporting and who they're serving. So I think once we understood the need, then you kind of go through the process of creating the nonprofit. Then there's the National Main Street program that, Main Streets can register to be a part of that. That has 4 pillars of how we're looking at economic development. So it's clean and green, right? Making sure that your area is clean, and actually, I forgot one, clean, green, and safe. That you have a viable area. That is it walkable? Is it drivable? Is there transportation, or do you have accessibility? Whether it's ADA accessibility or transportation. Can a bus line get there? And then looking at clean, looking at greening. When I came on board, actually as the official ED, greening, I'm a gardener. I love to garden. I was like, great, how can I figure out how to make this more green? How to make this just a space that people love coming to? And then a couple of the other pillars with economic revitalization is then recognizing, well, where are your holes? Are there other opportunities to bring in new businesses? Are there opportunities for growth? One of our longstanding businesses, as he has had opportunity, he has, expanded into bigger spaces. So we haven't lost him. He's just continued to outgrow his space because the demand is there for his products. And that's always exciting to see. But I think, looking at what the need is and how you can address it, and if it fits those 4 pillars with the National Main Street program, creating the organization. And then, not every Main Street is closely tied to your city programs. You can probably work with your state to tie it to a state level program. Because in Maryland as a whole, I can't even remember the number. I think there's maybe 25 Main Streets across the state, who may be the only Main Street in their county. So, there's, I think, enough of us out here that you have a model that you can look for to kind of see what closely represents, your area, whether it's an urban area or a rural area. I love going to our other counties that have main streets because I get to see, you know, what some of their issues are, because sometimes what their issues are definitely isn't what our issues are. And even for the 9 main streets here in Baltimore City, we collaborate on some issues. Like there's two of us right now that are kind of working together on the dollar store piece, because it has been a piece of contention for us and for our communities and for our businesses. But that may not be the issue for some of our other main streets. It could be graffiti. Definitely other main streets probably have more of a problem with graffiti, because at least here in Waverly, I've figured out a way around it that has made it, I think, successful for our area, where we get graffiti. It's annoying, but just as quickly as we get it, I can probably find funding to put up a mural. And at this point, I'll probably run out of walls to do that, which I think that's a good problem to have. But, you know, we all face something different. And when there's opportunity to collaborate, and I typically like reaching out across the country to another main street because I've seen that they have done something different or innovative, and I want to ask them all the questions. So I think there's enough of us where if you're in a community where you don't have a main street and you want a main street, there's so many folks, especially like me, who are willing to kind of share the toolbox to say, hey, we love another main street. How can we help you?
This has been such an awesome chat. And as I keep repeating myself, but I want people not in this area to realize that this is a blueprint. This is a recipe for ways of dealing with great things happening in their neighborhood, challenges in their neighborhood. And I want to be clear, when Jacob and I say shop locally, shop in your neighborhood, we say local, small, unrepresented businesses. You know, we want to make it clear that when you shop locally, you know, walk past the dollar store to your neighbor who, sorry, my cat tail hit something. He hates dollar stores too, but that you recognize who, you know, the fabric of your community. So we are so excited and thrilled that you shared all of this with us. And you know, if you live close, come and shop in Waverly, and if not, use this wisdom and this experience in your own communities. So thanks everyone for listening, and until next time, don't shop on Tuesday, but shop locally. Thank you.
Thanks.